The sun burned high in the sky, pouring heat over the empty land. It was afternoon in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, a place where silence could mean peace or danger. A team of Navy SEALs drove slowly through a narrow dirt path, dust rising behind their Humvees like smoke. Their boots were heavy, their faces hidden behind sunglasses and dust-covered gear. The lead Humvee moved forward with care, tires crunching over gravel and dry earth. Each man inside the vehicle stayed alert, scanning the hills and rocks, watching for anything that moved. The team had been on patrol since morning, and so far, everything had been quiet, too quiet. In a place like this, silence was never a good sign. Birds were gone, dogs weren't barking, and the local roads looked abandoned. Chief Petty Officer Darnell sat in the front seat, eyes narrowed behind the wheel. Next to him, Reyes, the youngest in the team, held his rifle close, his fingers tapping slowly. "Something feels off," Darnell muttered through the radio, his voice calm but sharp. The message reached the rest of the unit in the Humvees behind. "Copy that," came the reply, "stay sharp." As the team passed an old mud brick compound, the wind picked up, blowing a cloud of fine sand into the air. It swirled around them like a ghost, hiding the hills for a moment. Then the voice came through the radio, low and clear. "Threat at 2,100 meters. Every soldier froze for a second. The voice was from Petty Officer Mills, who was watching through his long-range scope from the last vehicle. He had seen something, a shape, a movement, far away, near a broken wall. All scopes turned in that direction. Reyes looked through his scope and saw it too. A figure, maybe a person, just for a second. Then it vanished behind a mound of rubble. "Could be a scout," Darnell said. "Could be a kid," another replied. But none of them looked away. Every second counted in these places. One small mistake could cost lives. They slowed the Humvees to a stop. The team leader gave a hand signal, and the doors opened quietly. Boots hit the ground, rifles raised, eyes locked on the compound ahead. The silence grew heavier. No wind, no voices, no sound from the hills. Only the steady hum of the Humvee engines and the pounding of hearts inside armor. Reyes moved with the team, his eyes scanning every shadow. He felt the sweat on his back and the heat rising from the ground. Even with all his training, even with all his gear, he felt small in that moment. They approached the compound wall, slow and careful, step by step, inch by inch. But there was no gunfire, no warning shot. Just the same silence, deep and endless. Then something happened, not far away, but right under them. A movement, fast and low, from beneath the rear Humvee. Reyes caught it out of the corner of his eye, and his heart jumped. He turned quickly, rifle ready. He didn't shout. Not yet. Something told him to wait. He dropped to one knee and looked under the vehicle. And that's when he saw it. A shape hiding in the shadows. Small, human, unmoving, but watching him. A chill ran down his spine. It wasn't a man. It wasn't a scout. It was a girl. Reyes stayed frozen, one knee on the ground, his eyes locked on the small figure under the Humvee. It was a girl, maybe 8 years old, her face smudged with dirt, her hair tied back with a piece of red cloth. She didn't cry, didn't move, just stared at him, her eyes wide, sharp, and unblinking. He slowly raised his hand and signaled to Chief Darnell, who turned and saw Reyes crouched by the Humvee. "What is it?" Darnell asked, moving closer. Reyes didn't speak at first, afraid a loud voice might cause panic. He just pointed under the Humvee, and Darnell leaned down, saw her too. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The other SEALs noticed the shift and held their ground, waiting for instructions. Something was wrong, not just because there was a child, but because of where she was hiding. "She came from the compound?" Darnell asked quietly. Reyes nodded. "I think so. Or maybe she was already here." That didn't sit right. The path had been clear when they arrived, and no one had spotted her before. So how had a child crawled under a military vehicle without being seen? They needed answers, but first, they needed to make sure it wasn't a trap. In this part of the world, the enemy used anything, even children, to hide danger. IEDs, ambushes, distractions. They had seen it before, and it never got easier. Don't move the vehicle, Darnell ordered over the radio. Possible civilian under Humvee. Repeat, do not move. Reyes tried speaking softly. Hey there, he said, keeping his voice calm. It's okay, we're not going to hurt you. The girl didn't answer, but her body tensed, as if expecting something bad to happen. Darnell knelt beside Reyes, pulled out a protein bar, and slowly unwrapped it. He reached out and placed it near the girl, just within her reach. Still, she didn't move. Then came the translator, a local Afghan man named Farid, who had worked with the SEALs for months. He crouched beside them and spoke gently in Pashto. Alia, the girl finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. My name is Alia. Farid looked surprised. She says she came to warn us. The air shifted again. Warn us? Reyes repeated, confused. Farid nodded, listening closely as the girl spoke again. Her next words made everyone's blood run cold. She says there's a bomb, Farid translated, his voice shaking. Planted under the truck. Not by her. By the men, before you came. For a moment, time stopped. The team had driven into a trap, and if Alia was right, they were sitting on top of a bomb. Everyone back away, slow and steady. Darnell ordered immediately. No shouting, no panic, just firm control. The SEALs moved with practiced precision, one by one stepping away from the vehicles, weapons still raised, eyes on every corner. Alia still hadn't moved. She stayed because she didn't want it to go off, Farid whispered, shocked by the courage of the little girl. She thought, if she stayed under it, you wouldn't drive away. Reyes looked at her again, and something inside him cracked. This child, small and silent, had crawled into danger, not to escape it, but to stop it. She didn't trust the men who planted the bomb, and she didn't trust the Americans either, but she had made a choice. To save lives, even if none of those lives belonged to her people. The SEALs called in EOD, the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Team, to handle the possible IED. Until they arrived, all they could do was wait, protect Alia, and pray she was wrong, or that she was right, just in time. The wind picked up again, blowing sand across the still vehicles. But now, the silence wasn't just silence, it was respect. For a child who chose to crawl under a war machine to stop a war from getting worse. The sun had started to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. The SEAL team stood in a wide circle around the Humvees, rifles raised, eyes scanning the hills and ruins around them. No one moved fast, no one spoke loudly. Danger had now taken a new shape. The girl, Alia, was still under the rear Humvee, curled up near the front tire. Reyes stayed close, kneeling a short distance away, keeping watch over her. Chief Darnell stood with the radio, giving updates to base and waiting for the EOD team to arrive. Each passing second felt like a minute. Every gust of wind made someone flinch. The team had been in many high-risk situations, but this was different. This had a face, a small one. Alia hadn't said much more after the warning. She simply watched, like she had seen this all before. And maybe she had. This land was old, and its children grew up fast. Farid, the translator, tried to speak with her again. Why did you stay under the truck? He asked softly. She looked at him, her eyes steady, then pointed to the ground with one small hand. Because they said if you move it, it will explode. The message was clear. The bomb wasn't just nearby. It was likely attached to the vehicle, maybe even the axle or the undercarriage. If they had driven a few more feet, it could have gone off. EOD's 10 minutes out, Darnell said, his voice steady over the radio. Tell them to approach from the north, low and slow. Reyes kept watching the girl. She wasn't afraid, not in the way a child should be. She was calm, too calm, like her fear had burned out long ago and left only smoke. The sudden shift came when one of the team members, Mills, saw something through his scope. Movement, rooftop, 2 o'clock, he said sharply. All rifles snapped upward, pointing at the broken rooftop of a nearby building. A figure, maybe a scout, maybe worse, moved quickly and dropped out of sight. Then another shadow on the opposite side. 2 targets, at least, Mills confirmed. Could be watching us, could be planning to trigger it manually. The air turned heavy again. This wasn't just about a hidden bomb now. This was part of a larger plan. A trap wasn't useful unless someone was ready to pull the string. They're close, Reyes said, checking his gear. If they realize we found the bomb, they might try to set it off anyway. Darnell made a call to base, immediate backup, drone surveillance, and clearance to engage if necessary. The team formed a wider perimeter, trying to guard both the girl and themselves. But still, the vehicle couldn't be moved, and Alia wouldn't come out. "I stay here," she told Farid when he asked her to crawl out. "If I leave, they'll know you found it." She was thinking like a soldier, not a child. It stunned them. This bravery, this quiet strength in someone so small. She had likely seen more death than any of them. And yet, she had chosen to act. "Tell her we'll protect her," Reyes said to Farid. "Tell her she doesn't have to do this alone." Farid spoke gently, trying to comfort her. But Alia only nodded and stayed where she was. Watching, waiting, being the smallest shield in the middle of a growing storm. Minutes later, the distant sound of an approaching vehicle hummed in the air. EOD was arriving. A new layer of tension wrapped around them. Time was running short, and so was distance. If the enemy was nearby, they might act before help arrived. Reyes looked up at the hills, then back under the truck. The sudden shift had come, not in noise, but in knowledge. They weren't just in danger, they were surrounded by choices. A child had made one. Now it was their turn. Alia lay flat on her stomach, her small arms tucked beneath her chest, her cheek pressed to the hot metal of the Humvee's underbody. She didn't move, didn't blink much, only breathed slowly, as if even air had weight. Dust clung to her skin like a second layer, and her red hair ribbon had slipped off, lying near the tire like a forgotten flag. Reyes lay a few feet away, close enough to protect her, but far enough not to spook her. He could hear the faint hum of the EOD vehicle approaching from the north. But his focus was here, under the truck, where a child had chosen to become a warning sign instead of a casualty. The rest of the SEAL team held position, rifles scanning the rooftops and broken walls. Each man on edge, fingers resting on triggers, breath tight in their lungs. They knew something bigger was happening. The girl wasn't the threat, but she had walked into one. "Why would she do this?" whispered Torres, one of the SEALs. "She's a kid." Darnell didn't answer. Some questions weren't meant to be answered, only respected. The translator, Farid, sat nearby with his back against a stone, watching her too. "She's been through things we can't imagine," he said quietly. "Some kids grow up in war. She was born inside it." A sudden gust of wind pushed more dust into the air, making the scene look almost unreal, like a faded photo. Reyes adjusted his helmet and leaned a bit lower. "Alia," he said gently, "you don't have to stay there anymore. Help is coming." She turned her head slightly, her eyes locking with his for the first time in minutes. "I must stay," she said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the wind. "If I move and they see you're afraid, they will press the button." Her words weren't just words, they were strategy. She wasn't guessing, she knew the rules of this dark game better than most adults. It broke something inside Reyes. This girl had no uniform, no training, no armor, but she understood sacrifice. And she had made a decision soldiers sometimes struggled to make. "She's protecting us," Reyes muttered, his throat dry. Darnell nodded. "We protect her back." 5 minutes later, the EOD team arrived, 2 specialists in heavy suits, moving slowly with metal detectors and tools. They parked behind a hill to stay out of enemy sight and approached on foot. Every step they took was measured, rehearsed, deliberate, like a dance with death. Reyes waved them in, pointing beneath the Humvee. The girl didn't move even then. She trusted the strange men who had arrived in machines and uniforms, but only enough to stay still. The EOD leader, a tall man named Rooker, knelt beside the vehicle. He looked under, saw the small form of Alia, and blinked in disbelief. "Jesus," he whispered, "there's a kid under there." He looked at Reyes, then back under the vehicle. "What she said is likely true. We see some wires already. Looks like a pressure switch and remote rig combined." They all knew what that meant. If the truck moved, it would explode. If someone watching pressed a button, it would also explode. A double trap, smart and cruel. And yet, Alia had found it first and warned them all. Not for money, not for reward, but because, as she would later say, not all men with guns are bad. Some look scared too. The EOD team began their work, slow and focused, crawling under the Humvee with tools, lights, and quiet prayers. Reyes stayed beside Alia, whispering simple words of comfort, even if he wasn't sure she understood. You're brave, you're not alone, we're going to get you out of this. Alia didn't cry, didn't ask for help. She just waited, still as stone, under the belly of a war machine, in the center of a minefield made by men. She waited and believed that someone would come for her. And now someone had. The sound of tools tapping gently against metal echoed in the silence. Every scratch, every movement under the Humvee felt louder than gunfire. The EOD team was deep in their work now, their heads and hands hidden beneath the vehicle, working to disarm the bomb. Alia stayed still, her cheeks still against the dusty metal, her eyes half closed but alert. She hadn't moved since she crawled under, not even to drink water or eat. She was more than a witness now. She was part of the machine, holding back the fire. Reyes sat nearby, watching her closely. He had seen trained soldiers panic, grown men freeze under pressure. But this girl, this silent child, was showing a kind of courage that shook him more than any ambush ever had. She's still not speaking much, Reyes said, glancing at Farid, the translator. Farid nodded. She understands us, but fear doesn't need many words. He stepped closer and knelt beside the Humvee, speaking softly in Pashto. Alia, you are doing very well, Farid said gently. The men are fixing the bomb now. They want to keep you safe. The girl blinked, slow and heavy, then whispered back. If they touch the wrong wire, everything ends. Farid looked at Reyes, his face pale. She says the bomb has a trick wire, a false wire, the kind that makes people think it's safe. The EOD tech under the truck, Rooker, overheard it through the small mic on Reyes's gear. Noted, he said calmly, she's right. I just saw a bypass circuit. It's smart, like a decoy. It was chilling. Alia had never studied bombs, had never gone to school. But somehow, she had learned to see these things, and not just see them, but understand them. She must have watched them build it. Torres said under his breath. Maybe more than once. The thought sank in. How many times had she seen death being planted like a seed in the ground? How many times had she watched men with wires and metal hide pain in the dirt and walk away laughing? Darnell moved closer, crouched next to Farid. Ask her why she warned us, he said. She didn't have to. Most kids run, or freeze. But she didn't run. Farid nodded and spoke again in Pashto. Alia looked at them both, her eyes quiet, but clear. Then she replied with a slow breath. They come at night, she said, and they leave gifts under the sand. My brother touched one once. He disappeared. Farid's voice shook as he translated. She says her brother died because of a mine. He was playing, and then he was gone. That was the language of fear, not loud, not violent. Just a whisper, a memory, spoken with the eyes more than the mouth. She thought maybe this time, she could stop someone else's brother from disappearing, Farid added, voice low. Reyes looked down, fighting the lump rising in his throat. This wasn't just bravery. This was loss speaking through a child's courage. You did stop it, Alia, he said, softly, hoping she could feel the truth in his voice. You saved us. All of us. The EOD team kept working, sweat pouring inside their heavy suits. Rooker spoke up, voice calm but firm. 2 more wires to cut. Tell the girl not to move, no matter what happens. Farid passed the message, and Alia nodded slightly. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. The dirt on her face was dry now, like a mask. But her eyes were alive. Afraid, yes, but steady. Then, silence. The kind of silence that feels like the world is holding its breath. A click. A pause. Another click. And then, disarmed, came Rooker's voice, sharp and full of relief. She was right. Bombs neutralized. We're clear. A cheer didn't erupt. It wasn't that kind of moment. But every man exhaled at once, the tension bleeding into the ground beneath them. Reyes crawled forward, gently reaching under the Humvee. Alia, he said, his voice softer than ever. You can come out now." She didn't move at first, then slowly, like a shadow breaking free from the dust, she slid out from under the vehicle. Reyes caught her carefully in his arms. She was light, too light, and quiet as a feather in his hands. Everyone watched as the child who had silenced death stood among them. Not with fear, but with something deeper. The kind of strength no war could break. The desert was silent again. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the silence that follows something dangerous, like the moment after a lightning strike. Dust floated in the still air, and for the first time in what felt like hours, no one was moving. Reyes held Alia in his arms, gently, as if she might disappear if he gripped too tightly. She didn't speak, just rested her head on his chest, eyes half open, skin warm with sun and fear. The bomb was disarmed, the trap broken, but no one lowered their guard. The seconds after the danger felt just as heavy as the ones before. Because in war, nothing is truly over. Sometimes, the moment after peace is where death hides best. Chief Darnell gave a quick signal to the team. "Eyes up, cover the hills," he said quietly. "Bombs clear, but they may have been watching." From behind cracked walls and broken rooftops, the enemy could have been observing everything, waiting, deciding whether to strike or retreat. The SEALs formed a circle around Reyes and Alia, rifles pointed out, hearts pounding in their chests like drums. Reyes felt it too, the strange weight of survival. They were still breathing, still standing, but the danger hadn't left. It had only changed shape. Farid crouched beside them, scanning the horizon. "She's in shock," he said, looking at Alia. "She hasn't blinked in a while. It's like she's still under that truck in her mind." Reyes nodded. He remembered that feeling from his first mission, the strange quiet inside, like the world was moving too fast and too slow at the same time. But Alia was just a child, and she had held that silence longer than most men could. Yodi Tech Rooker climbed out from under the Humvee, his suit covered in sweat and dirt. He pulled off his helmet and took a deep breath. "That was one of the nastiest setups I've seen," he muttered. They used a 2-switch combo, pressure and remote trigger, very advanced. He looked at Alia with a mix of respect and sorrow. If she hadn't spoken up, none of us would be here. The team stayed alert, the quiet stretching on, seconds passing like hours. Somewhere out there, the ones who planted the bomb were still watching, still deciding. Would they strike now? Or melt back into the hills and wait for another day? Darnell looked at his watch, then at the radio. "We've got 5 minutes until evac," he said. "Hold position, don't relax yet." Reyes gently set Alia down against the wheel of the disarmed Humvee. He offered her water, and this time, she took it, sipping slowly, her hands shaking just enough to notice. "You did something brave," he said, his voice low and steady. "You didn't run. You didn't hide. You helped us." She looked at him, then finally whispered, "You didn't shoot." That's how I knew. Those words hit harder than any explosion. In a place where children learned to fear uniforms, to run from guns, she had watched them and made a choice. Not all soldiers were the same, and she had seen the difference in their eyes. Farid translated her words softly, and for a moment, no one said anything. The wind picked up again, brushing over helmets and shoulders, carrying the weight of the moment with it. Then, a crack in the silence, a sharp sound in the distance. The team snapped to attention, scopes up, rifles aimed. But it wasn't gunfire. It was just a shutter, a metal door slamming shut in a nearby compound. Still, every heart jumped. In this land, even a door could mean death. The seconds stretched again, long, thin, and tight. Measured not by time, but by breath. Each soldier breathing in, waiting, holding it. Every heartbeat a drum of survival. And then, the sound of rotors. Low at first, then louder. A Black Hawk helicopter came into view, kicking up sand as it approached. Evac was here, finally. Darnell gave the signal, "Move." The SEALs fell into formation, surrounding Alia and Reyes. Boots pounded the dirt, fast but careful, each second still dangerous. Reyes carried Alia toward the chopper, her small frame pressed against his chest. She didn't look afraid of the helicopter, only tired. bone-deep tired, like someone who had fought her own war in silence. They lifted off seconds later, the Humvees and hills shrinking below. No shots fired, no last-minute attack. Just the dust and the sun and a little girl who had made all the difference. The Blackhawk's rotors beat the sky like a warning to the earth below. Inside the chopper, the team sat in silence. Not because they had nothing to say, but because some moments are too big for words. Alia sat on Reyes's lap, wrapped in a thermal blanket that looked far too big for her small frame. Her eyes remained open, not frightened, just watchful, as if she was still on that dusty road, under the Humvee, listening for wires and footsteps. Even in the air, even miles away from the bomb, she didn't fully relax. Reyes held her close, not like a soldier guarding a civilian, more like a brother protecting a memory, because that's what she had become for him and the others, something unforgettable. She had done something they would carry for the rest of their lives. Back at the base, the team touched down and moved fast. Medics met them on the landing pad, ready for injuries that never came. Still, they examined Alia carefully, checking for cuts, burns, dehydration, anything hidden beneath the dust on her skin. She didn't cry once. She didn't even ask where she was. She simply sat on the cot, accepting the juice box a nurse handed her, sipping it like she'd done it 100 times before. "She's not like other kids," one of the medics said quietly. "She's seen more than most of us." Farid stayed close to her, speaking softly in Pashto, translating what she needed to know. But Alia didn't ask questions. She only said one thing, over and over. "Is the man with the kind eyes okay?" She meant Reyes. To her, he wasn't just a soldier. He was the first face she had trusted in years. Farid smiled gently and told her yes. Reyes was fine, just cleaning his gear. She nodded, then finally laid her head down and fell asleep without a sound. Later, in the debrief room, the SEALs sat in a circle, dusty and drained. Darnell stood with a tablet in his hands, pulling up the mission report. "No injuries," he said, "bomb defused. 0 losses. 1 target evaded. 1 life saved all of ours." The team didn't cheer or clap. They just looked at each other, tired but full of something deeper than pride. Gratitude, maybe, or guilt. "She wasn't supposed to be there," Torres said, shaking his head. "And yet, she was the one who saved us." Mills added, "She knew about the wires. She knew how they worked." Reyes looked up, his voice soft. "Because she's lived around them her whole life." He paused, then said what none of them wanted to hear. "She's probably seen them go off more than once." The room went quiet again. This wasn't in the training manuals. You could prepare for ambushes, gunfights, even bombs, but not for bravery like hers. "She didn't do it for a reward," Darnell said. "She didn't ask for help, didn't cry. She did it because she didn't want us to die." That truth sat heavy in the room. A child, alone in a war-torn village, had risked everything to stop a tragedy. Not because she owed them, but because she saw something different in them. Maybe just for a moment. "She called me the man with kind eyes," Reyes said quietly. The others looked at him. "She said that's how she knew she could trust me. Not the gear, not the flag, just the eyes." They all went silent again. In a world where enemies wore no uniforms, where lies came with smiles, it was a child who saw the truth in a man's eyes. The base staff gave Alia a warm room to rest in, fresh clothes, and food. She didn't ask for much and barely spoke. But when Reyes visited her that evening, she smiled for the first time. It wasn't wide, it wasn't bright, but it was real, and that was enough. She was a quiet heroine. No medals, no press, no parades. But every man in that unit knew what she had done. They had been trained to protect the innocent. And this time, the innocent had protected them. 2 days had passed since the mission. The dust had settled, but inside the base, echoes from that road still hung in the air. The Humvee had been cleaned and parked, but no one wanted to drive it again. It sat in the motor pool like a ghost. Not because it was broken, but because of what had happened under it. Every soldier who walked by glanced at the spot near the rear axle, the place where a little girl once lay, holding back death. Alia was safe, resting in a quiet room not far from the medical wing. She didn't talk much, but she was eating again, slowly finding pieces of calm in the storm she had lived through. The nurses had found her a pair of donated sneakers, still a bit too big, and a soft pink hoodie with a cartoon bear on it. She had never owned anything like it. For a child who had spent her life in survival mode, softness was strange, but welcome. Reyes visited her every evening after his duties. He didn't say much, just sat beside her, sometimes handed her a small book, or helped her open a juice box. Sometimes she'd ask questions in broken English. Why no boom? Where's my red cloth? Will I go home? Questions with no easy answers. But he did his best. He told her the truth gently, without fear in his voice, because she had already seen enough of that. Meanwhile, the team sat through their final debrief with Base Command. Everything had been documented: photos, wire diagrams, timelines, even the exact steps Alia had taken under the Humvee. The report labeled her simply as Afghan civilian, female, age 8 to 10, unknown background, identified threat, and prevented detonation. But she was more than that. To the team, she had a name, a voice, a face they would never forget. She wasn't a line in a report. She was the reason they were alive. Any news on her family? Darnell asked the intel officer. The man shook his head. No relatives found in the nearby village. Locals say her mother died last winter. No record of the father. An orphan, alone, living between war and silence. And yet, she had chosen to save strangers. The room went quiet. Again, that heavy kind of silence. Not from fear, but from respect. No one in that room could imagine doing what she did, not at her age, not even now. We can't just leave her behind, Reyes said suddenly. It wasn't a question, it was a decision. We figure something out. There's got to be a way. And they tried. Calls were made, forms filled out, supervisors contacted. There were barriers, legal ones, political ones, but the team kept pushing. Because when someone saves your life, they stop being someone. They become part of your story. By the end of the week, Base Command approved temporary protective custody under Allied supervision. It wasn't a full answer, but it was a start. Alia would be safe, housed at a secure civilian compound for war-affected children, with access to schooling, food, and care. Reyes was there when she was told. Farid translated the words gently. You are going to a place where no one can hurt you. A safe place, with books, and clean water, and people who will care for you. She didn't smile, not right away. Instead, she looked at Reyes and asked, You still come? His answer was simple. Whenever I can. Later, as the sun dipped behind the Afghan mountains, the SEAL team gathered outside their barracks. They watched the sky turn orange and gold. No mission today, no gunfire, no orders, just a quiet evening that almost felt normal. She changed something in me, Torres said, looking at the sky. Same, Mills nodded. Reyes didn't speak, but he felt it too. Something inside had shifted. A child with no armor had reminded them what courage really looked like. And now, her story was part of theirs. Not a tale of war, but of something stronger. Choice, humanity, and the power of quiet resistance. Alia had no medals, no flag to salute, but her bravery echoed louder than any gunshot. And long after the mission ended, long after the dust had faded from their boots, the memory of the girl who crawled beneath a Humvee to save them remained. Not as a footnote, but as a symbol of what war sometimes forgets, and what humanity must always remember.